What makes us happy? Is it love, success, freedom, or simply a well-timed slice of cake? In The Happy Brain, the science of where happiness comes from, neuroscientist Dean Burnett takes us on a fascinating and funny journey through the inner workings of the human brain to uncover what truly creates happiness. Far from being a vague, mystical feeling, happiness turns out to be a biological process, a complex dance of neurons, chemicals, and survival instincts that evolved to keep us alive. But here's the twist. The brain isn't designed to make us happy. It's designed to make us survive. Happiness, Burnett explains, is a clever trick evolution uses to reward behaviors that help us continue our species: eating, bonding, learning, and belonging. Still, our modern world confuses that ancient wiring. We chase pleasure thinking it's happiness, yet the brain often disagrees. Why do fame, wealth, or social media likes fail to satisfy us for long? Why does genuine connection or purpose feel far more fulfilling? Through humor and scientific insight, Burnett helps us understand why happiness is not a destination, but a moving target, one that shifts with context, relationships, and meaning. By the end of this journey, you'll see that happiness isn't something we find, it's something we create, moment by moment, by understanding how our brain actually works. So stay tuned for a full exploration of what really makes the brain happy, and how you can make peace with the wonderfully unpredictable organ between your ears. And if you enjoy discovering how science explains the heart's greatest mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we explore the fascinating world of human emotion and behavior, one book at a time. Chapter 1. What is happiness, really? The brain's trickiest question. Dean Burnett opens The Happy Brain with a confession. Even neuroscientists struggle to define happiness. Everyone wants it, everyone talks about it, yet when you ask, what exactly is it, the answers dissolve into feelings, metaphors, and wishful thinking. From a scientific standpoint, happiness isn't a single thing. It's not one region of the brain lighting up like a switch. It's a complex network, a series of processes involving neurotransmitters, hormones, and cognitive feedback loops. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, the brain's feel-good chemicals, all play their roles, but none of them is happiness. They're more like instruments in an orchestra, working together to create a fleeting moment of harmony. Burnett jokes that happiness is the brain's version of a thank you note. When we do something beneficial for survival, eat nutritious food, bond socially, achieve something, the brain rewards us with a dose of pleasure. It's evolution's way of saying, nice work, keep doing that. But here's the problem. The brain wasn't built for our modern world. It evolved in tribes, not cities. It was trained to chase immediate rewards, food, safety, social approval, not long-term fulfillment. So, in our era of endless stimulation and quick gratification, the same mechanisms that once ensured survival now often work against us. We scroll, consume, and compete, each action triggering little bursts of dopamine, yet the satisfaction fades quickly. Burnett calls this the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much we achieve or consume, the brain adapts and wants more. Happiness isn't a destination, he writes. It's a moving target defined by the brain's ability to adapt, and that's both a blessing and a curse. This first chapter sets the stage beautifully. Happiness isn't an illusion, but it's not a constant state either. It's a momentary alignment between what our brains expect and what reality provides. Burnett invites readers to drop the myth of permanent happiness. Instead, he urges us to understand how the brain's chemistry, environment, and expectations interact, because that's where real contentment begins. Chapter 2. The Social Brain: Why People Make and Break Our Happiness. In this chapter, Dean Burnett explores one of the most fascinating truths about human happiness. We are wired for connection. From the moment we're born, our brains depend on others, not just for survival, but for emotional stability and joy. Burnett explains that much of our happiness is socially constructed. The brain's reward systems light up not only when we receive pleasure ourselves, but also when we connect, cooperate, or feel accepted by others. Our brains are deeply social organs. Evolution built them that way. In fact, the very same regions involved in processing physical pain also process social pain. That's why rejection or loneliness can hurt just as much as a physical injury. He points out that this need for connection drives many of our modern behaviors, from social media scrolling to people-pleasing. When we get a like, share a laugh, or feel understood, our brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It gives us warmth and trust. But when that connection fades or turns toxic, the same circuits trigger stress and anxiety. Burnett takes a humorous yet insightful look at how we seek validation in ways that sometimes backfire. For example, trying too hard to be liked can actually make us miserable. He reminds us that the pursuit of approval is a double-edged sword. It's vital for social harmony, but dangerous when it becomes our main source of worth. Happiness doesn't come from being surrounded by people. It comes from being surrounded by the right people, Burnett notes. He also delves into how empathy, laughter, and even gossip have surprising evolutionary roles. Laughter, for instance, isn't just joy. It's a bonding tool, signaling trust and safety. Gossip, though often maligned, helps build shared understanding and social cohesion within groups. But the most powerful insight in this chapter is that social comparison is one of the biggest thieves of happiness. The brain constantly evaluates our place in the social hierarchy: who's richer, smarter, better looking. This reflex was useful for survival, but today it fuels envy and dissatisfaction. Burnett humorously admits that our brains aren't good at minding their own business. They're wired to scan for how we measure up, even when it makes us feel worse. The key, he says, isn't to suppress this instinct, but to understand it, to catch ourselves in the act and choose connection over competition. In essence, Chapter 2 reminds us that happiness thrives in healthy relationships. It's not built through isolation or self-obsession, but through empathy, community, and shared humanity. Chapter 3. The Achievement Brain: Why Success Doesn't Always Make Us Happy. Dean Burnett begins this chapter with a disarming observation. We spend much of our lives chasing success, yet often feel no happier when we catch it. That contradiction sits at the heart of his exploration of how the brain handles achievement, or rather mishandles it. Our brains are wired to pursue goals, not to rest on them. The dopamine system, which drives motivation and pleasure, releases its most powerful bursts before we reach a goal, not after. The anticipation of success feels thrilling. The moment of success, fleeting. That's why we crave the next challenge almost immediately. Burnett calls this the dopamine treadmill, where satisfaction is always just one more milestone away. He explains that evolution designed us this way. Early humans who stopped striving once they found food or shelter wouldn't have survived long. The brain's reward circuits evolved to keep us restless, always chasing improvement. But in the modern world, with its endless ladders of achievement, this system can turn against us. Burnett dissects the psychological trap of conditional happiness, the belief that we'll be happy once we get that promotion, degree, or recognition. The brain, however, quickly adapts to new circumstances through a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. We get used to good things faster than we expect. What once felt extraordinary becomes normal, and the emotional boost fades. He offers a sharp critique of the cultural myth that equates happiness with productivity. We've been trained to measure worth in metrics, salaries, likes, performance scores. Yet our brains crave meaning and belonging far more deeply than numbers. The brain doesn't celebrate your resume, Burnett jokes. It celebrates your purpose. One of the most relatable insights Burnett explores is how failure often teaches the brain more than success. When we fail, neural pathways reorganize to learn and adapt. When we succeed, the brain's curiosity momentarily quiets. In other words, failure fuels growth, while success can lull us into stagnation. He points to studies showing that people who derive happiness from processes, learning, improving, experimenting, tend to feel more fulfilled than those who fixate on outcomes. The lesson? Happiness is less about finishing lines and more about the joy of running the race. But Burnett doesn't dismiss ambition. Instead, he redefines it. True achievement, he argues, aligns external goals with internal values. It's when your brain's drive for progress syncs with your sense of meaning that success becomes genuinely satisfying. By the end of the chapter, Burnett leaves readers with the reflection that resonates long after closing the page. Chasing happiness through achievement is like trying to capture the wind. It moves with you, not ahead of you.
Chapter 4. The Emotional Brain, the Hidden Engine of Happiness. Dean Burnett opens this chapter with a provocative statement. We like to think of ourselves as rational beings who sometimes feel. In truth, we are emotional beings who occasionally think. It's both funny and unsettling, and it captures the central thesis of the chapter perfectly. Happiness, Burnett argues, is not the result of logic or reason. It's the product of emotion. And emotion is messy, ancient, and absolutely essential. Our emotional brain, largely governed by structures like the amygdala and limbic system, evolved long before our rational neocortex. That means our feelings aren't secondary. They're the foundation upon which thought itself is built. He explains that every decision, big or small, carries an emotional signature. Even what we call rational choices are often guided by subtle emotional cues, a gut feeling, a flicker of anxiety, a sense of rightness. This isn't a flaw. It's an adaptive mechanism. Emotions give weight to experience and meaning to memory. Without them, life becomes technically correct, but existentially empty. Burnett dives into the neurochemistry of feelings: serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, describing them not as happiness chemicals, but as signals. Each one serves a purpose. Dopamine motivates pursuit and anticipation. Serotonin stabilizes mood and confidence. Endorphins ease pain and stress. Oxytocin fosters trust and social bonding. But none of them guarantee happiness. Burnett cautions against the modern obsession with biohacking our brains into joy. You can't trick evolution with supplements and self-help slogans, he writes. Happiness isn't about constant positivity. It's about emotional balance and authenticity. He highlights how negative emotions play a vital role too. Fear protects us. Sadness slows us down to process loss. Anger drives us to defend what matters. The brain evolved this full emotional palette for survival. Suppressing bad feelings doesn't make us happier. It just blinds us to what they're trying to teach us. One of Burnett's most powerful insights is that happiness often arises after emotional turbulence, not in its absence. The moments we call peace or contentment usually follow struggle, resolution, or acceptance. In that sense, happiness isn't a state, It's a rhythm. He also touches on the role of storytelling in regulating emotion. Humans make sense of their feelings through narrative, shaping chaotic experience into coherent meaning. That's why journaling, therapy, or even talking with friends can transform pain into perspective. Burnett ends the chapter by reminding readers that trying to be happy all the time is not only unrealistic, but neurologically impossible. The brain needs contrast, highs and lows, to register joy at all. Constant happiness would feel like emotional white noise. Happiness, he concludes, isn't the absence of pain. It's the art of finding light while the shadows still exist.
Chapter 5. The Moral Brain. Why Doing Good Feels So Good. Dean Burnett begins this chapter by tackling a paradox that philosophers and neuroscientists have wrestled with for centuries. Why does kindness feel rewarding? Why do we get a small rush of warmth when we help someone, tell the truth, or even hold a door open? The answer, he says, lies deep in the moral architecture of the human brain. Our moral instincts aren't handed down from the heavens, they're wired into our biology. Long before civilization, cooperation and fairness helped small groups of humans survive. Those who acted with empathy and loyalty were more likely to be trusted, protected, and included. Over time, evolution built a sense of morality right into the neural circuits of social behavior. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Acts of generosity activate the same reward systems in the brain that respond to food, sex, and music, a phenomenon known as the helper's high. When we do something good, our brains release dopamine and endorphins, reinforcing the behavior. Burnett notes wryly, doing good literally feels good. The brain pays us for behaving ourselves. But he also explores the darker side of morality. The same mechanisms that make us compassionate can make us tribal. Our brains evolved to favor in-groups, family, tribe, nation, often at the expense of outsiders. Morality, Burnett suggests, isn't always universal, it's adaptive. That's why people can justify harmful acts if they believe they're protecting their own group or values. The moral brain is a double-edged sword, capable of both empathy and cruelty, depending on how it's tuned. He also dives into the role of guilt and shame, describing them as emotional feedback systems that evolved to maintain social cohesion. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, there's something wrong with me. One motivates repair, the other can cripple growth. Burnett warns that modern life often amplifies shame through constant comparison and public scrutiny, especially online. The moral brain, designed for small communities, now operates under the global microscope of social media, which can distort our sense of virtue and belonging. Interestingly, Burnett argues that meaning, a key ingredient of happiness, often stems from moral purpose. When people feel they're contributing to something larger than themselves, their emotional and moral circuits align, producing a deep sense of satisfaction. It's not about being perfect, it's about being connected to a purpose that feels right. He brings humor to the science too, pointing out how our brains sometimes moralize absurdly. We'll feel guilty for eating a piece of cake, he jokes, yet think nothing of wasting hours scrolling through other people's lives. This illustrates how our sense of good is flexible, and often socially programmed rather than rationally chosen. Burnett concludes the chapter with a simple but profound observation. Happiness isn't just a personal experience, it's a moral one. We are the happiest when we act in ways that align with our values, when our inner compass points true. A clear conscience, he writes, is one of the brain's most underrated sources of joy.
Chapter 6. The Philosophical Brain. The Search for Meaning and the Myth of Constant Happiness.
In the final chapter, Dean Burnett turns inward, from neurons and hormones to the mysterious terrain of meaning itself. He begins with a wry confession. The more we try to define happiness, the more it wriggles away. For all our science and data, happiness remains deeply subjective, shaped by culture, personality, and belief. Burnett explains that the human brain is unique not just because it can think, but because it can think about thinking. This self-awareness, the ability to reflect on our experiences and imagine alternative realities, is both our greatest gift and our deepest curse. It allows us to dream, plan, and create, but it also opens the door to doubt, anxiety, and existential dread. That's why humans don't merely want to feel happy. We want to understand happiness. We search for purpose, coherence, and moral order, patterns that make our lives feel significant. Burnett argues that this philosophical quest is the brain's attempt to bring structure to chaos. Our minds crave meaning the way our stomachs crave food. He points out that religion, art, science, and philosophy are all, in their own ways, attempts to soothe the brain's need for meaning. Belief systems provide emotional stability. Narratives give our suffering context. Even those who reject spirituality often replace it with ideologies, careers, or creative pursuits that serve the same neural function, giving life a sense of continuity and direction. But here's the twist. The same self-awareness that makes meaning possible also makes us acutely aware of life's fragility. We know that everything we love will end. That knowledge, the awareness of mortality, can either crush us or liberate us. Burnett suggests that much of happiness depends on how we reconcile this fact. Denial breeds anxiety. Acceptance breeds peace. He discusses how some of the happiest people aren't those who avoid pain, but those who integrate it, who see joy and sorrow as intertwined. The brain finds balance not by erasing suffering, but by making sense of it. Viktor Frankl's idea that meaning can transform even suffering into strength resonates deeply here. Burnett closes with humor and humility. Your brain, he writes, isn't designed to keep you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. But every so often, it lets you glimpse happiness as a reminder of what life can be. He argues that our goal shouldn't be to chase happiness like a possession, but to cultivate conditions where it naturally arises: connection, curiosity, gratitude, and meaning. The book ends with a sense of gentle realism, neither cynical nor naive. Happiness is not a permanent state, but a pattern that flickers through a well-lived life. It's found not in the grand answers, but in the small, bright moments: laughter with friends, quiet awe at a sunset, a sense of purpose in helping someone else. The happy brain, Burnett concludes, isn't one that's always smiling. It's one that knows how to dance with its own contradictions.
The Epilogue, The Curious Paradox of Happiness. Dean Burnett ends The Happy Brain with a reflection that feels both scientific and deeply human.
After dissecting every neural circuit, social pattern, and emotional impulse behind happiness, he admits that there is no formula, and that's precisely what makes happiness so fascinating. He writes that happiness is less like a treasure to be found and more like weather in the mind, constantly shifting, influenced by countless unseen forces. Some days are bright, others overcast, but neither lasts forever. The trick isn't to chase the sun, but to learn how to live well in all conditions. Burnett reflects on how modern culture often treats happiness as a project, something to optimize, measure, and maintain. Yet the more we turn happiness into a goal, the more elusive it becomes. You can't grab happiness by the horns, he jokes. It notices you're trying and runs off. Instead, he encourages curiosity. Ask not, how can I be happy, but what makes my brain feel alive? He revisits the book's central threads, how connection, purpose, and self-awareness intertwine to form a life that feels meaningful. Happiness isn't about removing pain or uncertainty. It's about developing the emotional intelligence to face them without losing hope. Our brains, with all their flaws and contradictions, are perfectly designed for this balancing act. One of Burnett's most poignant insights comes near the end. Happiness often sneaks up on us when we're not looking. It appears in moments of presence, when the brain stops worrying about itself and simply is. Watching a friend laugh, helping someone in need, losing yourself in a song. These moments bypass the thinking mind and speak directly to the emotional one. He concludes with a note of optimism grounded in realism. You don't need to fix your brain to be happy. You just need to understand it, forgive it, and work with it. That final message transforms all the science and humor of the book into something quietly profound. The search for happiness isn't a quest for perfection, but a practice of awareness, of seeing your brain not as an enemy to control, but as a companion to understand. The epilogue leaves readers with a smile, and perhaps a sigh of relief, because if happiness is messy, unpredictable, and beautifully human, then maybe, just maybe, we're already doing better than we think. If you enjoyed this summary, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could use a little science-backed light today.